It's here for puppeteering. Speaking to Saara Chaudry about the Muppets Mayhem, streaming now on Disney+. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited. I mean, talk about nostalgic overload, right? With this, I mean, like,
I know.
Muppets. I remember when this was like announced, and I was kind of like, what? They're going to focus on the band? Like, finally, you know what I mean? Has it hit you that people are finally able to see what you've been working on, basically?
Not really. It was such a process to get here, and like we wrapped on the show about a year ago ish, give or take a month. And so just to like think about the fact that it's out and we can talk about it and people are enjoying it, I hope. It's just such a novel idea, but I think the moment that I was like, oh my God, like people are going to be seeing this was at the premiere when like Taj, Lily, and I all looked at each other and we were like, oh my God, like it's finally out. But yeah, I'm really excited. Such honor and a privilege to be a part of this.
It's so crazy. Show. How much do you know when you kind of audition and kind of get involved with the project? Like, do you know it's like a Muppets project? Like, do you know the character you're auditioning? Like, I'm just curious for that.
Yeah, when I received this breakdown, like it kind of depends on the project. So sometimes like the audition process will be like, yeah, you're like submitting a tape for something that you don't even know what it is because it's so confidential. Other times you'll know what it is, but like they'll give you like sides that are like neither here nor there. You don't really know what's going on and you kind of have to like make it up for yourself.
100%.
And other times you'll know exactly what it is, and other times you're not even auditioning and it's like a conversation with people that are involved with the project. But for this one, I knew that it was a Muppets project. They did disclose that to me, but the actual script that I did my first audition with, like the names were swapped. So like I was Hannah, but Janice, it was a scene with Janice and a scene with Nora. So Hannah and Nora were like good, but they switched the names of the Muppets so that we couldn't really figure out what it was. But like if you Googled it, you could have, because like Taj and Lily were already cast at that point. But they changed Janice to like Jane or like Jessica or like something else. But it was pretty clear that it was the Muppets. Yeah,
100%. And I do find it interesting too, because you know, you book it, it's done, you show up. What's that like first kind of getting to sets and everything and like just like soaking it all in? Like what's that like?
Surreal. There's actually no explanation that will ever do justice to the feeling that you get when you walk on a Muppets set. Like there is nothing like being told that you're going to be working on a set that's built 3 to 4 feet up and that is like movable in squares and that people will be inside of these holes and you need like to not fall in as you're performing. Like there's nothing quite like it. And then seeing these characters in person, it's like almost like it's jaw-dropping.
Yeah.
You get awestruck. It's just a level of like, I feel like I'm a 5-year-old kid again. Yeah. And I also feel like I'm in an alternate reality. But at the same time, I feel so grounded and human because these characters are so real and so authentic and speak to so much more than, you know, what they may present on the surface. So it's like a whole like plethora of feelings that you feel all at once, and it's quite magical.
It's definitely a magical feeling. I'm curious to know when you kind of show up and there's like the puppets and you see everyone and everything, is there a point where you're kind of like, that looks pretty cool and pretty fun, like I want to maybe like try to like, you know, play, like do like work with puppets and stuff? Do you think about that at all? But I feel like it's also a lot of work, right? Like they're kind of like working hard, like a lot of hours with those puppets too, right?
Like you're asking, like, do I ever think of puppeteering?
Yeah, like puppeteering. Yeah, I'm just wondering because you're around it the whole time, so I'm just thinking about that.
Not for a second. I think, did any of the live action characters in this show think that we could ever pull off like the masterpiece of what like these Muppet
That's what I was
performers
kind of
create.
going for, because it's such an art. Like, it's crazy what they do. Yeah.
Because they're doing so many things at once. They are not only, you know, getting a shoulder workout at all times. Like, all of these guys have had surgery on their shoulders, but like, not only are they like physically exerting themselves and like cramming themselves into small spaces so that you don't see them on camera, but they are like performing with their voice. They're performing with the physicality of the puppet. They are singing. They are recording a whole, for our show specifically, they're recording a whole album at the same time while shooting a show. They're dealing with obnoxious like live action characters that are in love with these characters and want to talk to them in between takes. Like, they're doing the most at all times, and I applaud them. And like, we all are like, we bow down to you. Like, so they
long answer, short answer, not a chance.
Yeah, long answer, short answer, no. But only because
the reason I asked that is because you're around them doing the craft, right? So even like, I should have even, not like, does it make you want to be a puppeteer? More like, did it make you, I just threw you in the fire with that question. Definitely.
Like, no,
but like, I should have phrased that as, did it make you interested in the art of puppeteering?
Yeah.
What's the answer to that question?
100%. It's such an art craft, and it's,
oh man.
If I could, I would. Yeah. I mean, I do sing, like, I am physical, like I dance, whatever. So like, but like the whole process, like, people go their whole lives training and learning how to make these characters as realistic and like bring them to life in the most authentic way possible. And like, that is just a whole beast of its own. And so I will leave it to the experts, but my goodness, I, you know, love and appreciate everything they do.
It's so crazy. And, you know, we talked about this before we started. You worked on a show when you were younger called Max and Shred, which was on YTV in Canada, and it had it was on Nickelodeon at some point as well. The question I have in regards to that is, I always find it interesting because, you know, you work on this. I'm pretty sure this is probably one of your first kind of, was it one of your first kind of acting jobs, would you say?
Max and Shred? Yeah. It was definitely like, if not the first, like one of the first like leads.
It was one of the first leads, right? So I'm just wondering, because I always find it interesting because, you know, when you're there working, I'm curious if it's like, or maybe it's a bit of both, where it's like, do you see it as, when you're there, you're like, I'm working, this is it, right? Or do you think about it as a stepping stone where you're learning a lot and everything for future projects and everything? Because a lot of people, you know, like their first jobs were on like Nickelodeon and Disney Channel, and they see it as a stepping stone, and then they work on other projects, right? But like, or were you just kind of focused on the craft while you were working on Max and Shred as Howie?
Well, let's start with, I was 8.
Yeah, 100%. No, absolutely. No, but like, I feel like that, it's one of those things too, where like, you know, maybe it's both. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I was 8. I was, you know, I was happy to be there, you know, and I'm the kind of person where like, yeah, okay, any normal average person is going to think about like the fact that, you know, things aren't going to last forever, or things can be a stepping stone. Of course, everybody thinks in that kind of way. But I think I'm also the type of person that like, I'm really lucky to say that I've pretty much been in love in some capacity with every single project I've ever done.
That's incredible.
And I like to be present. That's and amazing. I love what I do. And so, you know, I think back to previous projects and I'm like, no, like, I don't think of things necessarily as a stepping stone. I think of them as things that I'm doing in the moment, that I'm passionate about, that I love, that I care about. And of course, things are going to lead to the next, but I don't think I'm necessarily, you know, thinking in that kind of manner while I'm there. I love to be present and give my all to whatever character I'm developing and portraying in that moment. And I look back on that time in my life really fondly. I played this, you know, smart, brainiac, nerdy science little girl that had a massive crush on this snowboarder and would climb through the window of like her best friend's house and room to like do science experiments with him.
100%.
And you know, I made some of like my real like I literally saw Amelia McCarthy, who I worked with on that show.
She's been I've interviewed her as well. Yep.
Yeah, so I saw her today. We went to Hot Pilates this morning because she's visiting Toronto and heading back to LA soon. But I literally saw her this morning, and we, you know, it's the projects you do along the way that you gain some of your closest friends from. And I look back on that time in my life really fondly, and that was a really special project.
I wanted to make this a unique Saara Chaudry interview. I asked you about puppeteering, tell us about Massive Track. I wanted this to be its own thing. The Popturnitive exclusive interview with Saara Chaudry.
Yeah, I mean, you've done it, bro. Like...
Oh man, no, that's so good. Getting back to the Muppets Mayhem, I do find it really interesting as well, because whether you've been on a set one time or thousands of times, there's always going to be learning experiences. You're going to learn something new because of like the type of show it is, right? Like the content, the source material, the people you're working with, the directors. So what were some learning experiences for you from an acting storyteller perspective on the Muppets Mayhem?
I think it was getting acclimated to working with the Muppets. Like, it's such a unique experience. There's just like, there's genuinely nothing else quite like it.
Yeah.
At a certain point, it didn't become like, okay, you know, this is Animal, and, you know, this is Eric who performs for Animal. Like, they became, it wasn't just like they weren't one anymore. They became separated at a certain point. And it was really beautiful to go through that process of like, oh my gosh, like these characters are their own beings. They have so much heart and authenticity and so much more to say. That, like, you know, like Animal has like so few words, or he says so many like crazy things, or he'll be kind of bonkers or whatever, but like his emotional capacity is so much deeper than people realize. And then like once you get to know these characters individually, you kind of separate them from their performers. And so like at a certain point we were stepping onto set, and it was no longer like, hey, like Eric and Animal, like it was just like two separate things. It was like, good morning, Animal, let me have a completely separate conversation with you, and good morning, Eric, let me have a completely separate conversation with you. So like I think the learning curve of recognizing that, yeah, these are technically inanimate objects, but the second that these performers begin and you know, action is called, like these are their own characters. They are so human in so many ways. And I think just kind of adjusting to that life for a couple months was it was definitely a learning curve, but it was so cool. And I think the technicalities as well is something that we had to learn. Is like I mentioned before, we're on sets that are 3 to 4 feet up, and like there's holes in them so that the performers can be in there. And so it's just like understanding, just like, you know, being safe on set and understanding where you need to stand and whatnot. But for the most part, it felt like any other wonderful, magnificent show. And I think just the technicality of working with the Muppets was something that we all kind of had to learn, but it was the greatest honor and privilege to get to learn that. Like, I really, like, I don't want to underplay how cool it was. Like, it's so cool to work with the Muppets, and like, I got to do that. So I feel really grateful that I got to go through that learning curve.
Absolutely. That was a well said answer, 100%. And you know, the Muppets Mayhem is streaming now on Disney Plus, so people could check that out. Saara, it's so great chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Your Instagram account, if people want to keep up to date with everything, what is that, so people could check it out?
Yeah, it's just my name, at Saara Chaudry, Saara. Everything is there. I keep everything up to date. My life at school, my life on set, Everything is there.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, this has been Popturnative. youtube.com/Popturn for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Saara Chaudry, who you can catch in Muppets Mayhem, streaming now on Disney Plus, and PD Beats, signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popturnative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popturnative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popturnative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.